It's great to be back here and have a sort of a physical event. I haven't been to many in recent times. I'm actually originally from Spain, but I've been living in England and in the Netherlands now, and I've not gotten used to this weather anymore. It's great to be here. It's quite warm, actually. I came in with a jacket. I'm probably going to end up without a shirt, probably. In any case, I'm going to be sharing with you how we at Unilever R&D are leveraging artificial intelligence to change, to transform the way that we create innovation. And I'm going to start with the big picture because it really matters, and it tells a lot about why we're doing what we're doing and what are our aspirations when it comes to transforming the way we do R&D. So it has become, I guess, almost impossible to ignore some of the fundamental challenges that we face today as a society. You know, I think it all boils down, or most of it boils down to the, I guess, interplay and careful, I guess, interaction between three foundational building blocks. It's human life, you know, all of us. It's, you know, the planet where we live in, and energy that we need to survive and prosper. And this careful balance has always existed since the beginning of times, since the beginning of human species living on this planet. But just in the last 100 years, we've doubled the size of our population. We've doubled the life expectancy. So there's double the amount of people living on this planet and living for double the time. And that is creating, or has created, an unprecedented healthcare and resource gap, you know, leading to inequality of access and to a certain extent social unrest as well. We've all been witnessing that. Now, when it comes to energy, whether it is, you know, energy in the form of calories that you use for nutrition to keep alive, so to speak, or fossil-derived fuels that we use for transport or logistics, or fossil-derived carbon that we use for, you know, new materials, we're depleting the Earth without renewing fast enough. And we are creating, I guess, irreversible damage along the way. And our planet, the third element, which is both our home and our single most important source of energy, is suffering the consequences of all of this in the form of global warming, loss of biodiversity, and collapse of, you know, complete ecosystems, right? And for innovation-driven companies like Unilever, this is all compounded by, if you like, the accelerated pace at which consumer needs and consumer trends are evolving, you know, powered by technology or, you know, social platforms, but also by an increased sense of awareness amongst people that a balance of these three things need to be restored, and the change needs to happen now. And why am I telling you all of this? You may think, look, you know, this is great, but what does it have to do with innovation or AI? Well, it has to do a lot, if not all, because this affects every company in every sector, in every industry, and the R&D and innovation teams as well. We urgently need to redesign our products and services, to redefine our business models, and deliver groundbreaking science that can help innovate for both people and planet whilst growing our business. Now, I'm a firm believer of the role of science and technology, particularly in creating a better future. You know, I'm an optimist, I'm a technologist, and I truly believe in that. And I think we've all seen this at play just recently. You will remember very, very well how the pharma industry was able to come together, right, and create an effective COVID-19 vaccine in months rather than years. And it was not just only the companies, it was the entire ecosystem, you know, the regulatory, the funding went into that as well. But it was largely driven by access to large amounts of data, high processing computing, and advanced analytics, to be able to innovate in silico, to be able to understand the effect and the interactions between molecules virtually, and as a result, being able to radically reduce the time it takes for drug discovery, for clinical trials, et cetera, et cetera. And we were, you know, the happy receivers of that innovation, you know, and it saved lives. Right? And I think this is just a glimpse of what we can expect or we can achieve going forward. Now, innovating in a consumer goods organization goes beyond what happens just in the lab. You know, we're talking about innovation end-to-end. It starts with consumers and it ends with consumers. That's how we understand innovation is. It's an end-to-end process, and it is about the digitalization of all these pieces, right? Whether it is predicting consumer trends through real-time, early stage market signals, being able to translate those predictions, those insights into what we call a holistic set of requirements for product superiority. So basically saying, look, this is how we predict consumers, this is how we predict what consumers need, and this is the requirements on innovation. This is what we should be developing, because if we did, then it will address that latent or nascent consumer need, and do that very much data-driven. Then being able to take those, I guess, requirements for innovation and design formulations with ingredients from biosources that can be combined to deliver those required properties that the product needs to be able to do what it says it should do. And then optimizing all of these for, cost, sustainability, claimable benefits, supplier availability, supplier readiness. It all becomes a mathematical problem, really. And then linking all of these, and together with process simulation, being able to transfer all of that body of information into a highly automated manufacturing plant to produce the innovation with minimal waste and net zero impact. This is, this is becoming or starting to become possible, and this is the way that we're creating new innovation as a combination of data, high-performance computing, and machine learning. And just to give you an example, so just to bring it alive, when we look at Cornetto ice creams, I wish I had one now, but if you look at Cornetto ice creams and the fact that we're able to, reduce the degrees or how cold the ice cream cabinets need to be to be able to preserve those ice creams. We need to look at formulations and actually change the very core of the formulation of an ice cream to be able to still be frozen without necessarily having to keep the ice cream cabinets that cold. And with it, we're reducing energy consumption, we're reducing our CO2 footprint, et cetera, et cetera. Think about the hyper-concentrated formulations that we're starting to bring to market for shampoos, or even washing liquids, where we don't need to use that much water in the processing, in the processing stage. And we can increase the value density of our products for e-commerce. Think about, I don't know, the chocolate coating that goes into the Magnum ice creams. I mean, we really model that, very, very careful to make sure that we're able to make it healthier, reduce the levels of sugar in that chocolate, but also making sure that it's resilient enough in the processing so that when Magnum ice creams hit each other during the processing stage, the chocolate coating doesn't break. There's all these things that if we didn't have access to virtual simulations and modeling, we'll have to test in the physical world and get to the right answer after a very, very long time. So what we're doing, de facto, is basically transferring a lot of activity that typically would happen in the physical space and put it into the digital domain. Right? Transferring activity from the physical into the digital space. Why? Because in digital, we can discover, we can design, and we can optimize without constraints, without friction, almost unconstrained. And we're basically delaying the transition back into the physical world, which is where we ultimately need to manufacture our products, right? But we're delaying it as much as we can, because although we manufacture the products in the physical space, we're bound to the limitations, the constraints, and the unfavorable economics, if you like, of the physical world. And that's a little bit the essence of it. Now, let me deep dive a little bit into this in silico piece. What is it that we mean with in silico? How do we do it? How would you combine data, high-performance computing, and machine learning into one? So basically, we are a large consumer goods organization, so you can imagine that our range of interest in science and technology fields is very broad. It goes from alternative proteins to biotechnology to new, biodegradable materials, and much of it is about reformulating or creating new formulations for our product, right? And these formulations should deliver, the best possible performance at the lowest possible cost, at the highest possible level of sustainability. That's where innovation really happens, when you've got that span of forces that are, those vectors that are contradictory in nature, right? So you cannot do one and then at the same time do the other. But innovation happens when you create those spans. And in order to do that, we really need to zoom in into molecular level, right? To be able to design the chemical and biological structures that would deliver across these three vectors: performance, cost, and sustainability. So as an example, we would start with trying to understand what the relationship is between molecular structures and their properties. You need to understand, what is the effect and what the molecule will do and how it will perform and how it will be perceived and experienced by consumers and what the structure of it, what role does it play, And we use a number of machine learning models. You have here sort of an acronym, quantitative, structure, activity, relationship models. You probably have heard last year, I heard there was someone from DeepMind this morning. So last year, DeepMind, Google, made public AlphaFold, which is a sophisticated AI model. That basically what it does is it predicts the structure of proteins based on the sequence of amino acids. And why? Because the structure of proteins is fundamental to understand the properties of that molecule, and the effect that it will have is almost like the workhorse of biotech proteins. And if you crack it, then you can use it for particular purposes. I think this is fundamental, and it's at the core of what we're trying to achieve here. Now, once we understand what kind of structure we should aim for, because we understand what kind of properties we should design for, then it's about finding the right molecules that can actually fit that structure. And we use a number of methods, AI methods, including genetic algorithms, to try and evaluate tens of thousands of possible molecular combinations, one of which will hit the requirements that we're looking for. And we do that today in 3 minutes, something that would take us probably, I'm not kidding, thousands of years in a lab. So it's mind-blowing, but trying to understand that we can compress thousands of years of work in a physical lab and replace that with minutes in a computer model is something that is a game changer. Now, you can imagine that what I'm telling you here and you think about it, it does require a massive transformation in an organization, particularly in an R&D organization, which is what I focus on. This doesn't happen in one go. That doesn't happen overnight. It impacts a lot of things. And I've tried to, highlight here what I believe from experience are the 3 fundamental success factors in these digital transformation, if you like. The first one is about technology and data, and the fact that, in my view, in my experience of having worked with a number of companies, large organizations tend to have invested in their IT infrastructure in a relatively siloed way, in functions, right? It's not necessarily a data-driven architecture that most companies go for. There's a lot of legacy systems. They don't talk to each other, and data needs to be freed up in order to be able to extract value from it. Data becomes the single source or the most significant source of value when we talk about in silico innovation, and in order to be able to let it flow and manage it appropriately, we need to think about how to architect our IT systems to be able to do that. And that is not trivial, particularly in large organizations that have already invested in some level of legacy. The second one is about the human element, which often goes, in my experience as well, unnoticed or not put at the sort of enough level of importance. It is not just about technology. You can invest massively in building a fantastic architecture, data models and management, all the rest of it. If your team does not embrace technology, nothing will happen. It is about not just embracing technology for the sake of it, but thinking about reimagining how you can do your work in radically different ways. It's about rewiring the R&D organization because we have access to capabilities that we didn't have before. Now, if you're a scientist and you've spent the last 20, 30 years working in a lab, and that's what you do, and you're incredibly proud of your work, rightly so, and the next morning someone tells you, well, look, we've developed an AI model that actually does what you do and does it very, very well. How are you going to be reacting? Probably you're not going to trust it, right? So it's a question of trust as well. And we work a lot. It's about change management. It's about making sure that people understand that technology is not there to replace anyone, but rather to amplify impact. And that takes time. The third one is about open innovation ecosystems, because when we drive this is a complex topic. It requires multidisciplinary skills coming together. It's about natural sciences, about informatics, it's about processing and engineering understanding. We don't have all of that, and we shouldn't have all of that within Unilever. We should become very good, and we're getting there, at partnering with the ecosystem And we do partner with research institutions, we do partner with big tech and small tech, with startups, because we require the best in class in each of these domains to be able to move the needle and move the envelope of innovation. That's what we do. And this is a muscle that needs to be trained. Now, the exciting thing here is, in my view, that we're on the verge of a number of technological breakthroughs that I think are going to boost our capabilities to deliver what I call responsible innovation. I'm going to mention the ones that I think are the most critical ones. For Unilever, for the industry, not just FMCG specific, I think it could be more than that. The first one is about quantum computing. I think the use of quantum mechanics to boost our computational power is one of the most exciting things ahead. It will allow R&D teams basically to tackle bigger and more complex problems in science. There's no question about it. It will not substitute or replace, in my view, it will rather enhance. It will work in hybrid architectures to do the heavy lifting on data-intense problems and then combine with high-performance computing for answers that require a higher level of precision. But it's going to be big, and we're certainly following and teaming up with other companies to make sure that we are already testing and trying things out, because as and when it comes, it will be a game changer. Next generation AI, foundation models that pave the way for generic intelligence that can be applied across domains with minimal effort. That's, in my view, another game changer. We're still at the early stage, but foundation models, and you probably know of a few, GTP3, DALL-E from OpenAI, BERT from Google that is powering most of the Google searches of the world right now. These are models that have already been developed, leveraging huge amounts of data, largely unsupervised, and already delivering value. And that, I think, for me, it's super exciting. So in addition to this, the widespread adoption of low-code and no-code developer tools for AI is going to continue to further democratize AI in organizations. And this, together with quantum, in my view, is going to redefine how companies do science and innovation. Third one is hyper-automation. Everything in a company that can be automated is bound to be automated. Whether it is in business operations, customer service, billing, cobots in a lab, in a pilot, on a main plant. Automation will sit at the intersection between the physical and the digital world, right? It will execute manufacturing processes that require, higher levels of precision, agility, and speed, and in my view, it's going to redefine the economics of manufacturing. Another game changer. And then Web3. I'm not sure about this conference, whether there's been a lot of talk about Web3, but every time I go out and talk to people, everybody's talking about Web3, metaverse, and everything. It has the promise, if you like, or it promises to transform the way that companies engage with consumers and co-innovate. It's very much at the peak of inflated expectations, you would agree. Nothing wrong with that. I think all technologies have gone through that. I think I was just reading last week, the real estate in the metaverse has gone up $1 billion, which is like, ooh, it sounds like a bubble, but obviously there's something in it. And companies should be engaged with it, not just wait and sit and see what happens with it, but rather help shape it, help contribute to understand and evolve it. But if it does what it says it will do, the premise here is that consumers, people, will spend more and more time online, right? Parts of their lifestyle activities will actually be transitioning to online and offline. It'll be a hybrid, slightly hybrid world. And all these data will be, will serve to create deeper and richer virtual footprints of you, of individuals, digital twins, if you like, obviously with all the associated opportunities, but also risks that involves. Now, it's not any single one of them, but I think the four of them that won't materialize at the same time. There's slightly differences in terms of how they will become mainstream. That is going to, I think, revolutionize how companies engage with consumers and how companies innovate. Now, this sounded probably a little bit theoretical, but let me try and bring it alive, with an example of a simple Dove soap bar. Yeah. So it's a hypothetical future example when all these technologies come together, and it starts with trust. And trust is critical in that new, brave future world. And because it will be based on the trust that you may have with Dove as a brand, that you may want to give us access to the data on the microbiome of your skin. For example, you may want to give us data on activity, nutrition, sleep through your wearables. You may want to give us access to your digital health records as well, all of which can contribute to create an imbalance in the natural protective and self-healing mechanisms of your skin, which is what the microbiome does, right? So we have this data, and the idea is that we will be then applying our codified science in the form of algorithms to these deep and highly personalized data and run hundreds and thousands of simulations simultaneously to get to the right formulation for you, with 100% biodegradable ingredients sourced from a supplier near you. The right product for you and for the planet. Then we'll be taking that information, right, and with the right processing parameters, we will be transferring all of this to a highly automated manufacturing plant in your vicinity, where the soap, or your soap, will be created with zero waste and net positive impact on the environment. Now, once the soap is done, which should happen almost instantaneously, if you like, it will be shipped to you by drone just in time for when you need it. Now, you may want to engage with us whilst you're using it or after use. You may want to do that digitally. We may want to meet in the metaverse, for example, and you can give us feedback on what the experience was. Is there anything that we need to change in the product, in your product? You may want to even co-create the next product with us. And with your permission, we will be keeping that data. We will be feeding it into your digital twin in order to build a better understanding of what your needs are and build a more meaningful relationship between you and the brand. Now, what I said should happen without friction, with minimal effort from your part. And it's applicable to most, if not all, products, consumer products that you buy and use on a daily basis. And as and when this materializes, right, we hope to be contributing to reestablishing the balance between people through healthy living and preventative care accessible to all, the planet with 100% biodegradable ingredients, and energy through the use of recycled and renewable materials and net positive impact processes, or in other words, what we call innovating for people and planet. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alberto. I have to say, I always love listening to you talk, because it's so great to have somebody from an FMCG company coming and talking about quantum and Web3. Last year you were coming talking about in silico and taking processes from the pharmaceutical industry into FMCG development, which I think is fantastic. Just see if there's any questions. If anybody's got any questions, I'm going to kick off with one though, just while people are thinking. There's a lot that you've talked about there, clearly, a huge amount of new technologies. I know you've taken on partnerships as part of your responsibility with Unilever since last year. So talk a bit about that. How does partnerships and your ecosystem work to get all of that stuff done?
Yeah, thank you. It plays I was going to say significant role, but it's either, we do it through partnerships or this wouldn't be possible. At Unilever, we have a bit of a mantra that says, if you think you can do it alone, you're not thinking big enough. Partnerships is critical for companies like Unilever to get into this space. Now, it's true, I just recently took over the responsibilities for partnerships in R&D. That includes the Unilever Foundry, which is our vehicle to engage with startups. And I think, as I said, because these things are so complex and require such different levels of expertise that traditionally have been, in different industries, the only way to drive this together, which is really at the intersection of digital and science and natural sciences, physics and biology and chemistry and now, digital and software and AI and the processing that needs to happen, to be able to run all of that. There's no other way for us to be able to do this without partners. And it's the ability for us to create that trust in partners as well. These are fairly dynamic networks of innovation, and we're all guided for, more or less to do we all share objectives, if you like. It's a good example is what we're doing in the UK with the Hartree Centre, part of the Science and Technology Council here, on computational models, working together with some of the universities, Liverpool, Manchester, just to name a few. I shouldn't start talking about names because I forget some, but it is a highly collaborative exercise that we need to that we need to do.
Fantastic. No, it makes understandably so. Any questions from anybody in the audience? Do we have a microphone? There's a gentleman right over at the back in the corner. Thank you very much. And then, was it? Yeah, Ruth, thank you, in the front.
Thank you. With such a large organization and so many products, how is your innovation team structured? Is it centralized? Is it decentralized?
Right. So the largest part of our R&D organization, which is probably about 90+% of our R&D teams, sit within the business groups. So we have 5 business groups. This is public information now because we've come out of a global reorganization where we had 3 divisions now, and now we have 5 business groups. And the R&D teams sit within those business groups. There are some selective capabilities, like mine, where digital needs to happen all across, right? Digital benefits from scale, and therefore it does make sense to centralize and offer that as an enabler for the R&D teams that are operating in the business groups. But by and large, the R&D teams sit within the business.
Fantastic. Thank you. One more over here.
Hello, I'm Ruth Thompson. I lead the consumer business at Cambridge Consultants. I loved your personalised soap example. That's kind of really fun, and how you're talking about that fitting within Web3.
Yeah.
If you take if Web3 actually fulfills what it's saying it's going to, the consumer is going to own their digital twin, not you.
Yes. Yes.
And they could take that to, P&G or L'Oreal. How are you going to square that circle? Because at the moment, a lot of it is in the value of the data.
Yes, no, that's a very good point. And it happens the same thing with healthcare. I have a healthcare background, and digital twins in healthcare have been long spoken about. But it is true that healthcare data, as much as this data, belongs to the person that produces the data, i.e. you and yourself. Great question. We have not figured that out yet, to be honest with you. In a world where data is so precious, but we don't own it, it's you who own your data. How can we make sure that probably trust plays a role there? How can you make sure that we get access to your digital twin? You give us permission to use it because you believe that you're going to get something great out of us accessing your data. I think at the end of the day, in these kind of relationships where I own the data, but there is another company that if they had access to that data, they could create something great for me, the owner of the data. A lot of it is based on trust. And it's down to us to be able to nurture and promote that trust. And I think, frankly, that's, in my view, one of the advantages of long-standing organization with well-established brands as well. We have a presence in many of these brands that you see on the screen that spans many, many years of trusted innovation, and the ability for us to be able to leverage that as a competitive advantage when we go into a data-driven world, virtual, metaverse, and so on, it's something that should give us a bit of the edge. Now, I always say trust comes on a donkey and lives in a Ferrari, because building trust takes such a long time and effort, but you can destroy it in one go. So obviously, the ability to us to do the right things. And build that trust that allows us to access your data so that we can serve you with great innovation is something that probably should be the way forward for companies like ours. Yeah.
Perfect. Alberto, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.